So it turns out that mayors do TED Talks. In particular, the one I'm most familiar with was done by the mayor of Oklahoma City, a fellow named Mick Cornett. He's done a number of TED Talks, but the one, again, with which I am most familiar was about his weight loss journey. That will not be this TED Talk this evening. Instead, we're going to endeavor to answer the question, does what politicians have to say really matter at all anymore? When we look at what's happening in Washington, D.C., or now during the roughly 90 days of lawmaking that is happening in Helena, and we hear the programmed chatter from either side, and I happen to belong to one of those sides, but I still recognize that the chatter is programmed, and it goes back and forth and up and down, and we really all know what to expect. We really know what to expect, and we really don't have to even listen anymore to what some of the folks we've elected to serve us in high positions in the nation's capital and elsewhere have to say, because we already know. We know what their answers are going to be, and so we tune it out and we don't pay attention, and we really lose faith in all of what's happening there. I was trained as a journalist here at the University of Montana 30 years ago, and things are much different today. But one of the things that I learned as a journalist was to be careful with language, and one of the things that I have learned through experience and now the glory of middle age is that I don't have to be as careful. And I can be a little more thoughtful, and I don't have to be as programmed, and none of us really have to be programmed. And right here in Missoula, Montana, we have an opportunity to use our words to do really remarkable things. So I happen to be in a line of work where I apply for my job every 4 years. It is a relatively rigorous process. In the end, some people just say it's a popularity contest. During the course of those job applications, the first of which I did in 2005, I developed what I learned was called a stump speech. And folks in my line of work make these over and over again. And basically it is our attempt to tell folks in a fairly succinct manner what it is we intend to do if you mark the oval next to our name at the ballot box on any given November day. And so the stump speech is a way to sell. So I started my first stump speech telling folks that if you were to elect me mayor, I would support a number of things, the first of which was an open space bond. So this is 2005. There has been an open space bond that happened before, and the open space bond was about asking ourselves, asking everyone in the city of Missoula and everyone in Missoula County to make a long-term investment in the land that surrounds us, the land that we inhabit, the land that we enjoy, and we would make that investment forever, or as close to forever as we can conceive. We wanted to do that because we believed that Missoula was and would only be a place if we preserve some of what is best about it, not only for ourselves to enjoy, but for generation after generation after generation to enjoy. So we talked about passing an open space bond, which had a certain romance about it, and in Missoula was a very popular thing to talk about. The other thing I talked about during my stump speech was, in effect, the polar opposite of romantic. It was zoning. There are planners who groove on zoning in a way that's zoning isn't sexy typically. I will just say that. But without it done right, which it had not been done in the city of Missoula, we were at odds with one another. We couldn't figure out how to build stuff, how to grow, how to expand, contract, change, and we were fighting because the code that guided the way our community developed was developed 70 years ago in some cases, or 30 years ago, and nothing that was happening in 2005 was the same. Almost nothing that was happening in 2005 was the same as it was 30 years ago or 70 years ago. So we said, we're going to do something about zoning. And my rule at that time with the Stump Speech was we were going to have 3 things to talk about. And as it turns out, at that time, I was younger and could remember 3 things. I don't remember what the 3rd thing is. But I'm sure it was important. What I do remember, however, is that when I was elected, I worked with a whole bunch of fabulous people who decided that the ideas I talked about in the Stump Speech, which weren't original to me, but those ideas had some value, and those ideas had the kind of legs they needed to make change in the community. And what happened was I said we were going to do them, and we did them. Get out, right? So then we tried some of this again, and as we marched down the path, I started to realize that the things that I said could become ideas that others believed in, and those ideas could be made manifest in our community in a way that made it better. And so we started to look at what issues were at play in the community, what was unresolved, what sort of things should we fix. And so I stood in front of a group of about 400 folks at a Chamber of Commerce spaghetti luncheon. By the way, spaghetti should never be served at a luncheon. That's an idea worth sharing. But at this spaghetti luncheon, in the middle of a really ugly recession where a mill that employed at that time about 417 souls turned off the lights almost overnight, and an iconic downtown department store shuttered its windows as well, and people were feeling as if the earth was moving underneath them in a way that they couldn't control or change or manage. I said, I think together we can figure this out, and we can grow businesses here in Missoula, and we can create an environment where folks who have good ideas and interest in taking care of one another and doing good things, we can create an environment where we can make a difference. And from one speech, we created a $3.5 million fund to make economic development work in our community. It was one speech. It was one idea. It wasn't original to me. But when it was uttered, it became real. And it became real enough that other folks could buy it. So we looked at other opportunities. We had a baseball stadium that was a wonderful community asset, but it was facing foreclosure. And we said, that's not the way we're going to roll. And despite the fact that it was controversial, we said, we're not going to let this community place go away. We're going to pay for it, and we figured out a way to do it. We solved that because we said we'd solve it. And it turns out there's more. And so you can go from something as tangible as a baseball stadium, or as practical as saying we are going to make an investment in the economic well-being of the women and men of the city of Missoula, or it can be as hard and as complicated and as frightening as solving the fundamental problems of the day, which are not going to be solved today in Washington, D.C., or frankly, Helena for our place. Our problems are going to be solved right here because of the people in this hall and the people who are working their shift somewhere this evening, or taking care of their kids or their parents, or living their lives. Because we can believe. So this community decided we want to end homelessness. We were tired of hearing that souls in our community, our friends and neighbors, people we have a responsibility to care about, were sleeping on the street, or sleeping on a couch, or in a car, or in a flea bag hotel room, or someplace they simply shouldn't be sleeping because they didn't have a safe and decent place to live. And so what we said to each other is, we're going to end this. We're done. We in Missoula, Montana are going to end homelessness because we believe that everyone has a right to a safe, decent place to live. And so we created a 10-year plan to end homelessness. Homelessness isn't ended yet. It's only about year 3. But I tell you, because we thought it, because we believed it, because we said it, the idea became a plan, and the plan became a series of actions. And I firmly believe it may not be 10 years, may not be 15 years, it may not be 20 years, but I guarantee you that this community, because we can turn words into ideas, into action, into commitment, this community will end homelessness. Which tells me that this community and communities just like it all around this country and all around this world can commit to making indelible change. We can do all of this stuff because our words matter. So what a stump speech is, really, it turns out, is a politician making a promise. But here's what can happen. We can keep our promises. What does a bear do in the woods? Any damn thing it wants to.